Hello everyone, I am International Master Ratkovic Milovan. Welcome to the Richter-Veresov Attack. Before we start analyzing concrete variations, let's talk about this opening, general plans and ideas, about the name of this opening and so on. So, it is named after two strong chess players, International Master from Germany, Richter, and Soviet Master Veresov. They used to play this opening in 1930s, 1940s, 50s, and they had some really nice games. Later, some very strong grandmasters continued to play this opening, like Mikhail Tal, Boris Spassky, Vasily Smyslov, Bent Larsen, and they had some nice games, and that's why this opening became popular. Nowadays, grandmasters like Hikaru Nakamura, Mamedyarov, Artemiev, Morozevich, Rapport are still playing this opening, and they have some really good results in this opening. So it is very sharp. There are some really crazy variations, and yeah, I mean, if black doesn't know opening theory, it will be very difficult for him to fight against the Richter-Veresov attack. What is white trying to do in this opening? White is trying to develop pieces as quickly as possible and to attack black. So that's the general idea. In some variations, we will see black will have very solid setup. So in those variations, we will simply play positionally and try to outplay black, which will be not so difficult to do because white will have slight advantage almost in every single sub-variation. So I wanted to show you a first couple of moves, and then we will talk about variations and other things. So d4, it usually starts with knight f6. This is the main move order. So d4, knight f6, then white plays knight c3 in the second move, and then black goes for d5. Why? Because white would like to push e4 and gain space in the center. So d5 is the main move, and then bishop goes to g5. This is the Richter-Veresov attack. Now what? There are, of course, a few options for black. In this course, we will talk about these moves. There is knight bd7, the most important move. This is the main line, and definitely the most solid variation for black. Why black does this? Because if we take the knight on f6, eventually he will take back with the d7 knight, and black pawn structure will remain very solid. So there is knight bd7. There is e6 move, also very popular. Black simply plays, normally he wants to develop the pieces and so on. There is c5 move. There is c6 move. Interesting moves. We will see white can, in those variations, white can simply play positionally, and white will have slight advantage. There is also g6, fianchetto variation, and there is bishop goes to f5 variation. Later we will analyze some unusual lines, so some unusual moves like knight e4 or bishop g4 or pawn to h6. So these variations we will analyze in this course. As I said, knight bd7 is the main line, and we will start with that because in this line there is a lot of opening theory, and you really have to know this because it is main and most of people do this. What should white do? Let's play pawn to f3. Now there are different plans and ideas for white, but I think that this one is the best. I mean, I I like this one the most, because our idea is clear. We want to push e4, and then we will have very, very good center. Now what? There are 4 replies. There is pawn to h6, there is pawn to e6, pawn to c6, pawn to c5. c5 is the main move, and we can start with that. So right now we are analyzing main variation in the Richter-Veresov attack. What should white do? What did I say before? I said this is very sharp opening, and many times we will have some crazy positions on the board. So yeah, let's attack in the center. Let's play e4. It's really not easy to be black here, especially if black doesn't know theory, opening theory, you know, because there are a lot of possibilities in the center. And yeah, let's go like one by one and analyze all those possibilities. D takes e4 is the main move for black, but first, before we go and see what will happen in that variation, let's see c takes d4. So these 2 moves are main moves. D takes e4 is the best move. We will analyze it later, but first let's see c takes d4. Now what? Now the problem for us is if we take with the queen, black is going to play e5 with tempo. Then our queen will have to go back, and it's again black's turn, and it's really not simple. So instead of taking the pawn on d4, we will take the knight on f6 instead. If knight takes f6, queen takes d4. Now the d5 pawn is hanging. Black has to take on e4. If he does something like this, then simply long castle, and the d5 pawn cannot be saved. So d e4. Then let's play bishop b5, check. Bishop goes to d7. And then let's play long castle. Bishop takes b5. Black has to do that. If black doesn't play bishop takes b5, he will definitely be in trouble, because there is a pin on the d file and the bishop on d7 is in danger. So this is his only chance to take here. Knight takes b5. Black has to exchange queens. If he doesn't do that, queen a4 will be played. There will be pins all over the board, and black will be completely lost. So queen takes d4, rook takes d4. There is knight c7 threat. Now the only move for black is e5. If rook c8, by the way, then the a7 pawn is hanging. We will take it. e5, rook c4. There is still knight c7 threat. Rook d8 maybe. F takes e4, and then the next move is knight f3 to attack the d6 pawn. a6, check on c7, knight f3 attacking the pawn. Bishop d6, rook d1, let's pin the bishop. Knight d5, knight d5, rook d5, and white is slightly better here. I know it's quite long variation, but I just wanted to show you this scenario. This happens if black plays well, if black plays best moves, you know. But many times your opponent will be totally confused. I'm not talking about some weak opponents. I'm talking about even some strong players, because, you know, if you don't know theory here, it's really hard to find right moves, even if you are a strong player, international master or grandmaster, you know. So right, this is one scenario. So again, let's go back and see what happens here. So d4, knight f6, knight c3, d5, bishop g5. Knight bd7, pawn to f3. We want to push e4. We said there are 4 replies here. We started analyzing the main one, c5. Let's play e4, cd4, bishop takes f6. I didn't mention that, but there are 4 options for black. We already analyzed one of them. We analyzed knight takes f6. Other options are d takes c3, e takes f6, and g takes f6. We will go through all these variations. Let's see d takes c3. D takes c3 is inaccuracy, because after bishop takes c3, our bishop will be fantastic. We will have this open diagonal, and it will be very hard for black to develop his pieces on the king side and play short castle. Very hard, because our bishop is attacking this g7 pawn constantly. d4 maybe. And then let's play queen to e2. This is novelty, and this is very, very good developing move. We are planning to play long castle as quickly as we can. If e takes f3 maybe, that would be a mistake, because then our knight goes there with tempo. After playing long castle, white will be much better, because you see all these pieces are undeveloped. Okay, the knight is developed, the only developed piece, but it is not on the right square. It is blocking the bishop on c8 and blocking the queen. So black will have to spend one more tempo to activate the knight. So knight f6 maybe. He stops long castle. So useful move. And then let's play knight to e5. So now if bishop f5, so black wants to develop his pieces normally. He's trying to do that. Then there is rook d1. Queen f3 attacking the bishop. Maybe g6. By the way, if e6, then this is mate, I think. Check. This is almost checkmate, right? So g6 is much better defense. But then the same. Bishop b5, knight d7, bishop d7, bishop d7, rook d7. The game is over. White is a piece up, and there is also mate threat here. Black will lose the queen. I mean, it's disaster. So, right, I mean, it's very bad for black to develop the bishop. What if e6? Safer, but still, there is queen b5, check. Bishop d7, queen takes b7, rook b8. And after queen takes a7, black is completely lost. Why? Because white is going to play long castle, rook will be on the d file, and this bishop will be attacked several times. So black doesn't have enough resources to defend the bishop and save the game. Black is completely lost here. So what are we doing in Veresov attack Richter-Veresov attack very often? We sacrifice a pawn, sometimes two pawns, but in return we will get very strong initiative. And in all these variations, white is ahead in development, which is very important, because many times black simply don't have enough time to develop all the pieces and play short castle. And that's, as you know, one of the most important things in chess, to complete development and castle and have stable position. So again, let's see. Bishop g5, Richter-Veresov attack, knight bd7, then let's play pawn to f3 c5, e4, cd4, bishop f6. So far we talked about knight takes f6 and d takes c3. What if e takes f6? In this variation, of course, let's take on d4, maybe bishop c5 with tempo, but then let's take the d5 pawn. Here white is a pawn up. Okay, black has this good bishop on c5. By the way, we don't have our dark square bishop on the board, but still white is better because of an extra pawn. I mean, that is of course important, and white is going to castle long, and white position will be very stable. White will be a pawn up, and that's it. So maybe castling, long castle, queen a5, king b1, prophylaxis, knight e5, but then let's play knight to a4, and let's try to exchange pieces and simplify position. Queen a4, queen c5, maybe bishop e6. It goes with tempo. b3, queen e8, knight e2. Then let's play knight to f4, and white is of course better here, because white is a pawn up, and black didn't achieve anything On the queen side, our king is still very safe, and yeah, white position is better. And what if g takes f6? In that case, let's take on d4. Now the d5 pawn is hanging. d4. Of course, we will not take on e4. We don't have to. Let's develop long castle, and then our rook on d1 is fantastic. What if e takes f3? E takes f3 is a mistake because black wastes time and develops our knight. Now our knight goes out with tempo. Maybe e6. Then let's play queen f4. Bishop e7. Let's play bishop c4. Then rook h to e1. White has much better position here. Black is up a pawn, but black position is, in my opinion, falling apart. Because if black castle short, black king will be very exposed here and very weak. So, right, maybe rook h to e1. Later, queen goes to h6. Maybe bishop goes back. We will attack this square. This square is also very vulnerable, so there will be some threats there, maybe to sacrifice some of our pieces. This knight goes here. This knight on d7 is in the pin because the queen is on d8. So it's very hard to play this position as black because black pieces are very passive, as you can see. All of them. So, right, white is clearly better here. Of course, it's not good for black to do something like this, to take on f3, and then black will develop our knights, our pieces. So it's better to play a6 to stop bishop b5, because our idea was to play bishop b5 and attack this knight several times. So a6, bishop goes to c4. This pawn is also weak. Maybe bishop h6 check, king b1, and then castle. Now is the right time for us to take the e4 pawn. Let's do that with the queen. Let's play g4. Very instructive moment. We would like to play bishop d3 in the future and attack, and why not to take h7 pawn. But the point is, you see that black is preparing f5, and that this diagonal, b1 h7 diagonal, will be closed. So in that sense, let's play g4 and let's stop f5. Bishop g7. First, let's play knight g e2, and then bishop d3 will be played. That's, by the way, unstoppable, and the h7 pawn will fall. Also, this knight goes to g3 and h5 and creates some other threats. The bishop on g7 will be in danger. Okay, yeah, white is again clearly better here. We are done with c takes d4 line. So, again, just to remind you, bishop g5, Richter-Veresov attack, knight bd7, pawn goes to f3 with e4 idea. c5, main move. Then, e4 should be played. If c takes d4, white should take on f6, and then we went through four possible moves for black. Knight takes f6, e takes f6, g takes f6, and d takes c3. Now, what if d takes e4? As I said, main move, and of course you have to know this, because this is one of the main variations, maybe even the main one, main variation in the Richter-Veresov attack. What should white play? White should definitely play pawn to d5, a pawn sacrifice. So if black takes here, white will develop the knight with tempo. Now there are a couple of moves. There is, let's analyze g6 and a6. Those two moves are best for black. Let's see g6 first. Why g6? You see that black cannot play e6 and develop the bishop somewhere on this diagonal. Of course not. So g6 is the only way to develop the dark square bishop. Then let's play queen d2, bishop g7, and then let's play long castle. Short castle, and then let's play h4. Our plan is fast kingside attack, and yeah, it's not easy for black to defend the king side, because black is much slower here. Black's development is not so not so fast. And these pieces, like the queen is still on d8, bishop is on still on c8, rooks are still there. Yeah, on the other hand, white pieces are very very active and yeah, well coordinated. So now black has to play h5. If maybe a6 with b5 idea, and then later to fianchetto the light square bishop. Of course, this is wrong because it is too slow. White will play h5. Maybe black takes with the knight. Then let's play d6. Maybe knight from h5 comes back to f6. What else to do? I mean, let's take. Let's play bishop h6. Let's take with the queen. Black is, in my opinion, lost because knight d5 will be played. We'll try to deflect the knight on f6. There is also knight g5 idea with threat on h7, and yeah, that's it. So black is 2 pawns up in this variation, but what does that mean? Nothing. I mean, black is completely lost anyway. So that is why we're sacrificing a pawn or 2 pawns sometimes in the Richter-Veresov attack. We want to have a fast and a deadly attack in the early middle game. So, by the way, if black doesn't take on h5, if he does this, then white can simply take and then play bishop to h6. We will eliminate this good defender and mate on the h file. So I will show you b4 maybe. Let's take. Let's give a check and then let's mate on h8. If black takes with the f pawn, then there are some weaknesses like the e6 square. We can do the same thing, and later the e6 square will be occupied by some of our pieces like the knight or something like that. So white is better anyway here. Why? Because black is much slower, and that's the whole point. If black play h5, that's the best move. He has to stop our move h5. Then let's play d6 right away. Black has to take. If e6, for example, then g4 should be played immediately. One more pawn sacrifice. If h takes g4, h5. We sacrifice the knight too. G takes f3, then let's play h6. If bishop goes back, what else black can do here? I mean, we're threatening to take this bishop and then there will be mate in a few moves. So bishop h8, but then there is h7. Bishop h6 check. Bishop g7 check, discover check, you see. And then queen h6 and queen h8 mate. So remember, this move is really difficult to see if you don't know this pattern. So g4, why do we play this? Because black cannot take with the knight. The knight is pinned. He has to take with the pawn and then h5. Maybe black doesn't want to take at all. Maybe queen a5 instead. And now if we take on h5, black is planning to take back with the knight. Not bad, right? But we're going to take there anyway. Knight takes, and then bishop goes to h6. This is one of black's best pieces on the board, so we're trying to eliminate it. If bishop takes c3, then queen should take on c3. Look, we cannot take with the b pawn because the a2 pawn is hanging. Then our king will be in trouble. So queen takes c3, bc3, and this endgame is better for white because this pawn on d6 is limiting black pieces. It is paralyzing black pieces, especially these two. The knight on d7 and the bishop on c8. If some of these pieces move, then pawn goes to d7 and we win the game. Rook e8. Let's play rook g1. Let's play bishop d3. Let's play knight g5 and let's attack that pawn chain. f7, g6. Now we have different threats. The most obvious one is knight takes f7 and bishop takes g6. We'll take the knight. Also, the rook on e8 is hanging and white is winning. Yeah, so you see black is a pawn up here, but again, that doesn't mean anything. White has much better position, even though queens are off the board. So maybe black doesn't take the knight on c3. Maybe a6. There is b5 idea, then b4, and then the a2 pawn hangs. But that's too slow. Bishop g7, king g7. Let's play knight g5, b5. Rook goes to g1. Bishop b7 maybe. Let's sacrifice on e6. Pawn takes. Let's sacrifice the rook. Queen g5 check. Let's take the knight. And that's it. Game over. After rook f1, king will have to go to e8, and then there will be queen e7. Checkmate. If black tries to prevent that, rook f1, and then there is queen g6 or bishop g6, and it is mate. You see, it's very, very hard to play this as black, and especially if black doesn't know theory. Even if he knows theory, it's really, really hard because there are many different variations in here, and it's really difficult to remember all of them. But the point is, for white, it's much easier. White simply develops the pieces, play long castle, and then go and attack on the king side. Maybe, look, black doesn't want to do this fianchetto thing immediately. Maybe instead of doing that, first a6, b5, bishop b7, and then later he will develop pieces on the king side. In this case, let's play queen d2. We have the same idea, and then after b5, long castle, simply. If b4 looks very tempting for black, but it's not good. Because then knight a4 should be played. And then there is this hole. So bishop goes to c4. Bishop g7, rook h to e1. And we are trying to push d6 at some point. We'll find the right moment and push the pawn. Short castle, queen f4. Why queen f4? Because we have battery here, but it's better to have only the rook, because then black queen will be in danger. So after we play queen f4, now these two rooks are controlling these central files. And after we push d6, black will be in huge trouble. Bishop e7, maybe first prophylactic move, king b1. Rook c8, g4. You know, at some point we will push d6. Also h4, h5 will be played with the king side attack. Black pieces are very passive, and black doesn't have any counterplay. That's the biggest concern for black. What can black do here? Maybe queen a5, but then simply b3. Pawn to b3 should be played. And nothing special. Nothing special happens here. Now the e7 pawn is hanging, so basically black need to do something like this or to bring the queen back. And yeah, we will continue. Sorry. We will continue playing. We'll continue playing on the king side, h4, h5, and yeah, black pieces are again paralyzed. That's the problem. Black is a pawn up in this variation, as you can see, but yeah, that doesn't help him. So yeah, I think it's very important to understand, to feel the spirit of this system, you know. Like, you need to have that feeling, like to sacrifice a pawn or two pawns, but then your position will be much better and it will be very hard for black to defend his position. So a6, queen d2, b5, long castle. Maybe black doesn't want to push b4. Instead, bishop b7 right away. Then queen goes to f4. Now if g6, g6 is, by the way, horrible blunder, because then we can take. If e takes, let's see this variation first, then bishop takes b5, one more piece sacrifice. A takes b, knight takes b. Rook e1 check, and then after bishop e7, d6. Short castle has to be played, but then d e7, rook will fall, and white will be what? A rook up, right. Okay, this is horrible for black, so maybe knight takes f6 instead. Then d6 should be played, e d6, and then again bishop sacrifice. Bishop takes b5. A takes, rook e1 check, with bishop e7, then the knight on f6 is hanging. Now the rook is hanging. If black moves the rook somewhere, knight takes b5, knight takes d6 will be played in the next move. So black position is collapsing here. Maybe king d7, but then knight e5 check. Fork on f7, and that's it. I think this is enough. So there is a fork. Also there is knight b5 threat. Also the d6 pawn is hanging. Also the knight on f6 is hanging. Black is losing. So this g6 move doesn't work. It's very bad. Instead queen a5 probably. There's b4 idea with queen a2 threat. Then let's play king b1, b4. Let's take the knight on f6 first. Knight takes, knight to e4. Again, black's problem is his development. This bishop is still here. It's very hard for black to castle. He'll have to spend a lot of time. Long castle, on the other hand, is not good because black king will be very unsafe there. So, right. Maybe if knight e5, let's play queen e5, and then there is unstoppable threat, knight to d6. We will also play bishop c4 with tempo. Also bring the rook here. Black is really slow here, and that's why he is completely lost. Again, black is 2 pawns up, but right, white's position is totally winning. Okay, we are done with basically with these variations. I just want to again to let you know what happens here and what should you do. So bishop goes to g5. Yeah, this is Richter-Veresov attack, and this is this beginning position, the key position. So there are a few variations for black, but this is the main one, as we said. What should white play? White should play f3 and then e4. 4 replies now. There is c5, the main move. There is c6, there is e6, and there is h6. We started with c5. What should white do? White should play e4. There is d-e4 and c-d4. If d-e4, d5. E takes f3, knight f3. And then we analyzed 2 moves. We analyzed g6, fianchetto, and we analyzed a6. We saw that in both variations white is down a pawn, sometimes 2 pawns, but white is better because black is much slower. White's development is much faster. White has more space and more active pieces, initiative, and that's why it's really hard to play this as black. What happens if e3 maybe? Black doesn't accept our pawn sacrifice. He wants to sacrifice his e-pawn, but he thinks that he will slow us down. Let's do this. Let's play queen d3 and take on e3 with the queen. Our bishop on g5 is perfectly placed. We don't want to go back and take on e3. We want to take on e3 with the queen. g6, queen e3, bishop g7, long castle, short castle, and again let's do this. Bishop h6, h4, h5. That's it. White has very strong attack on the king side. Black will try to attack white on the queen side, but black's attack is much slower, of course. So h5 will be played, and we'll take the bishop, open up the h-file, and try to mate black there. Okay, we are... by the way, if cd4, you already know, bishop takes f6. We analyze this variation first. There are 4 possibilities. Knight takes, e takes, g takes, and d takes c3. We went through all these variations, and you saw what's going on here. So we are done with the main line. We're done with c5. Now let's analyze other variations. Let's analyze e6, c6, and h6. These 3 variations are also important, and you definitely need to know them.